It's another day and another build here in the studio at microcenter. And for today's build, I'm going to do a couple of different things. I want to make a really nice, clean, kind of white build, but I also want this to be good for gaming. I want this to be very good for video editing, and I want this to be at a decent budget. The total price for this build came in at around $1,700, but that's taking into account the 2 hard drives that I've included with this. The base build is actually $1,084 at the time of filming, which is a really good budget build that can do both video editing as well as gaming. Going into today's build is going to be one of our Intel bundles at microcenter. This features the Intel Core Ultra 265K. This is a really good CPU that you can use for gaming and video editing, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. And this is paired off with the Asus Z890 AYW gaming Wi-Fi motherboard. Really nice white accents on this. It's going to match the build really nicely. And then 32 gigabytes of DDR5 memory. So that bundle, that already saves you a couple of bucks, and you're gonna get everything that you need to get this build started. Now, I paired off this Intel CPU with an Intel GPU. Over here, I have the ASRock Steel Legend B580 GPU, which I really like this GPU. This performs really well. 1440 gaming, we've done some videos on this in the past. It actually performs really well, and the drivers are just getting better and better. But one thing about this Intel onto Intel combination that we're doing, it's really good for gaming. It's really good for video editing, content creation, anything like that. Intel CPUs, they have Intel QuickSync, which is your hardware support for video editing. That is really needed if you use DaVinci Resolve, Adobe Premiere. Editing on Windows, you really need some hardware acceleration these days. That's very important. And the media engines on the B580 GPU, well, that pairs off very nicely. So we're gonna do some demos with a couple of programs at the end of this video, so stay tuned. Now from there, I have an Arctic Freezer 36. This is the ARGB white version. So again, matching our white theme. This has a TDP of 220 watts, so that's gonna keep our Core Ultra 265K nice and cool. Frankly, I really like air coolers. They're just easier to work with, easier to install, and frankly, I think they actually look pretty nice. Now, I paired this off with a Western Digital Black SN7100. This is a 1 terabyte Gen 4 SSD, and 1 terabyte, that's more than enough for your operating system, some of your applications, some of your games. That's gonna do you just fine. But I do recommend maybe getting some additional SSD storage down the line, because you are gonna burn through that really fast if you're a video editor. I also paired this off with 2 Western Digital Gold hard drives. These are 14 terabytes each. So that means 28 terabytes of spinning drives in this PC. And I know you're already typing up the comments, why am I putting a hard drive into this computer? They are slower than SSDs. Yes, they are slower, but bulk storage like this is really needed for video editing. Everything I do gets backed up onto a spinning drive because we burn through a lot of storage. Think about it this way. This is the 3rd build video I've done this week, and I have 1, 2, 3 cameras rolling right now. Every single project that we do is anywhere from about 50 to 100 gigabytes. And that's kind of on the lean end because some of our projects can actually balloon up to like 200 gigs. That adds up really fast when you think about how many videos we do. So if you are trying to even get into streaming, if you're capturing clips of all your gameplay, that stuff adds up fast. And spinning drives are actually fast enough to read and write some of your video footage. You're not gonna get that really good random read and write speed that you will with an SSD, but if you take an old project, back it up onto a drive, and you just need to open it up in DaVinci and just export a new clip, you're actually not gonna run into any issues, and I do that very often. So always recommend getting spinning drives. And the cool thing about getting a drive like this at your local microcenter, we do have bundled pricing on our Western Digital drives. So when you purchase 2 or more, you can get some additional savings. So for instance, with these 2 Western Digital Gold 14 terabyte drives, you can save $20 per drive when you purchase 2 or more. So that's actually a really good savings that you can get. So stay tuned for that and keep an eye out for that one on our website. Now, to power this whole build, I have an Asus Prime 750 watt power supply, 80 plus gold rated. Also white, gonna match our theme pretty well. And then housing our entire build is going to be this very nice looking Montech XR wood. I gotta say, Montech has really been knocking it out of the park this year with cases. I really like some of the cases that they're coming out with. They look really nice. They usually have fans built in. They're really easy to build in, and they're affordable. They're actually like priced really, really well. I like the wood accents that they have here. They have the little Montech logo kind of carved into the wood, so it looks really clean. And I think we're gonna have a really nice, clean looking build today. So why don't we get started and start building? All right, so I have everything prepped, and now we're just gonna dive into our build. We have our Intel Core Ultra 7 265K, and this is an LGA 1851 socket. So this is gonna be a little bit bigger than some other socket sizes. And what's particular about this one, I got everything all prepped. Our cooler actually has its own little contact frame that's gonna go in place here. So I'm gonna use the screws that are keeping the rest of the socket in place, but then I'm gonna get this in place now. All right, so it's just 4 screws. Hardware comes off just fine. There is a back plate back there. And definitely wanna make sure you save this hardware in your motherboard box. Now, this contact frame works really well for getting better pressure distribution on the 1851 socket. So if you're using like an older Intel, like 13 or 14th gen, which is LGA 1700, and then you have your new Core Ultra series, that uses, there we go, that's the right screw. That CPU shape, the IHS, it's a little bit more rectangular. So you wanna make sure that you get better pressure distribution with your cooler. So that's what the contact frame helps with a lot. And installation's pretty easy. And I also like kind of just how simple it makes the whole process. Now we'll just move on to our SSD installation. Now, like I said, this is kind of a mid-range budget build. What this does is this gets you a complete system that's gonna do a really good job of gaming, video editing, everything that you need. But it also gives you some room to grow. So for instance, 1 terabyte drive here, it's gonna fill up pretty fast, especially if you're a video editor, especially if you're a content creator, especially, if you're doing anything that's gonna really eat up that space. I mean, not to mention games are just getting bigger and bigger. So that's something to keep in mind. So that means you have extra M2 slots here and here that you could take advantage of, and you can always easily upgrade down the line. And we always have great deals on SSDs at Microcenter. So the idea is this kind of gets your foot in the door and gets you everything you need to perform really, really well, but then you can upgrade here and there down the line. Now, even with your memory, right? Because storage, yeah, there's some room to upgrade, but for your memory as well, 32 gigs, a lot of people will say that's kind of overkill for gaming, which it kind of is. You can get away with 16 gigs, but I think 32 just gets you some more future proofing. But 32 for video editing, it's a little bit on the lighter side. I would say 64 would be a lot better. But again, this gets your foot in the door so you can just start gaming, video editing, and anything else. And A2B2 slots, always like that they have them color coordinated so you know which ones to focus on first. We're going to populate those gray slots over here. All right, so the motherboard's all done, everything's all prepped, and a lot of people like to put the cooler on now when they're doing air coolers, which I guess I can get away with just fine. Usually, I like to put the motherboard in first, and then I'll put the cooler, even if it's an air cooler, just because it gets real cramped in these cases, and getting your EPS connectors and some of the other things in when it's already in the case can be kind of a pain. But we've got some good room in there. I'm not putting an AIO. I think we just attach this now. And as always, the most important part when you're putting on any cooler, make sure you take off the sticker. You have no idea how often we see that issue. All right, so thermal paste, I'm just gonna do a nice line. Kind of like to just do a line pattern for these rectangular IHS shapes. That always works just fine. That's gonna get you all the coverage that you need. Since we did a bulk of the work with the contact frame and just getting that in place, really it's just 2 screws, goes right in. Really easy installation. And again, this is why I like air coolers sometimes. From a maintenance perspective, they're really straightforward. You know, they can theoretically last indefinitely. I mean, not indefinitely, but they can last you a very, very long time. If your fan fails, just put on a new fan. AIOs, you know, they have a life expectancy that's getting longer and longer, but I don't know. I'm always going to be an air cooler fan at heart. I know that maybe having a big bulky heat sink sticking out of your motherboard might throw off your aesthetics, and with all the LCD screens that are on AIO pumps now, you know, I know that's a very attractive feature, and I like it too. I mean, both of these computers have that, but in my heart, air cooler gang all day. There we go. Nice even pressure on either side. Cool, motherboard's all prepped. I'm gonna go grab our case, and I think we are just gonna fly right through this build. Now, one other reason I really like this Arctic cooler, the fans, instead of having those little wire brackets that you use to sort of wrap around the heatsink, they just have these little screws, and it has these little post holes on the corners here. So this is actually just gonna snap right into place, which makes installation of the fans even easier. So kind of picked this cooler on purpose just to make my life easy. And I was talking about Montech cases before and why I like them. And another reason I like them, they are so lightweight. I can hold this with one finger. I mean, it's gonna be a lot heavier once the PC's in there, but look at that. Ooh, one finger, aha. Yeah, they're super lightweight. I mean, it's nice to have a structurally sound and sturdy case that's hefty, but honestly, this is more than enough. This is gonna do you just fine. All right, and everything's all set here. Like I said, there's one exhaust, 3 intake fans already pre-installed. Cables are already pre-run, so I'm gonna get all that plugged in after I'm done with all that, but I'm gonna fly right through this build. One thing I do wanna say though, if you're ever doing a build that has a pre-installed exhaust fan, you don't always have to remove it, but sometimes you have to remove it. It might get snug with your rear IO shield and all of this stuff here. It's usually pretty easy to work around, but if it's your first time building and you're a little bit nervous, don't be afraid to just take out this fan and just give yourself the room you need to really line it up. Oh, it comes with a little speaker. Those little old school speakers, what was it? Piezo speakers? I think I'm pronouncing it wrong. I'm saying it wrong. Either way, it's the little speakers that you put in, so it'll give you the tones and let you know what's wrong with your PC if it doesn't boot right. That's so cool that it comes with this. I'm not gonna use it, but it's cool that it comes with it. All right, so the screws are in little baggies, but I like it when they give you the tackle boxes, but I will say when they put it in the little baggies, I like it when they are clearly labeled, so that's always a plus in my mind. I'm always trying to tell the screws apart, and sometimes the motherboard screws and some of the other screws look almost identical. So I really have to sort of guess which one's the right one. So at least they're clearly labeled. It may not come with the tackle box, but as long as I know what I'm using, that's really all that matters. All right, motherboard's nice and screwed in. All right, so let's take a look at what we have going on back here. Pretty straightforward. Woo! A lot of fan cables. A lot of patch cables. They're all sort of just pass through one another. All right, and the most important thing that I always look for in a case, unified front panel connector. Super important. Always happy to see it. Remember that thing I was talking about my hands being too big to get the EPS connectors when I get the heatsink in the way? Yeah, that's the issue I'm running into now. I can get it, but also it really hurts. So whenever you watch our videos and you wonder, why is this guy not putting the heatsink in first before he puts the motherboard in? That's why, because it hurts trying to fit in that corner. It's doable. It's just, I'm just complaining about it. So easy to snap in. Now, do keep in mind, one fan is meant for the intake, one is meant for the exhaust, so just pay attention to where the screws are mounted when you're putting the fans in this Arctic cooler. But snaps into place, oh, so easy. I like that. Cool, so some cable management is all done. Made this a little bit neat. I've got our SATA cables going to our motherboard. I'm gonna get our SATA power for those 2 drives. And then I'm gonna get our 2 drives mounted to our drive bracket underneath. And this build is almost done. I like builds like this because they are actually very easy. They're very simple, very straightforward. So this will be done in no time. All right, so our build's looking pretty good. Cable management coming along pretty nicely. We've got a couple things kind of put down here. No fan controller in this case, so it's kind of just a spaghetti of cables, but that's okay. Got our SATA to our motherboard, and I have our power. So all that's really left is to get our hard drives in, and then we get our GPU and we're all done. Even got our GPU power routed through here, so that's all set. Okay, so our hard drives, the support for the spinning drives in this case, basically you have one that sort of gets screwed onto the top and the other one gets screwed inside. And there's no rubber grommets or dampeners or anything like that for sort of vibration reduction for spinning drives. It's not the end of the world. I don't feel great about it, but it's okay. You know, in 2025, when it comes to spinning drives, frankly, I don't want to call it an afterthought, but they're just not prioritized as much as they used to be. So when you're picking a case for spinning drives, even if it does say it supports up to 2 3.5-inch, hard drives, which this does. This actually does. You do want to do a little bit more research or talk to one of our knowledgeable associates so they can help you find the right case for you in case you want 2 or more drives and you want to make sure that they're supported in a way that you'll feel a little bit better about. I especially like the ones that'll have the sort of sliders mounted to the drive and then you can just sort of slide it in and out, sort of like a little rack. I always like those, but something to keep in mind. This will perform fine, but I would feel a little bit better if there was some sort of dampener there to sort of just reduce any vibration. I'm curious if this is going to make any additional noise. We'll see. All right, spinning drives are all set. Everything is plugged in and run. We're looking pretty okay. Cable management, it's fine. I mean, they're zip tied. They're kind of placed in. Everything's easily identifiable. So now we just insert our GPU. All right, so time for our GPU. Everything else is set. So we have our Intel B580. And then it's just 2 PCIe connectors here, 2 8-pins. Cool, all right. Let's close this guy up and get her to boot. So usually I use a turntable for these builds, but because this one is just so lightweight, I really don't need it. I'm actually very happy with the way that this came out. This is looking really nice. All right, and now for the moment of truth. Look at that. I like it. I really like white builds with rainbow unicorn vomit RGB. I'm actually a big fan. This looks great. So RGB on the GPU, on the cooler, and in the case, all cohesive, all running together actually pretty easily. I just daisy chained everything there. So pretty happy with the way this looks. Now, like I said before, this is a build with room to grow. You can add more M2 SSDs if you want some more storage. You can add some more memory or even upgrade your memory if you need some more memory for video editing and anything intensive, especially if you want to get into 3D design. And from there, I mean, really the world is your oyster. This is a really good PC. I'm going to get this set up with Windows, a couple of applications, and let's take this for a test drive. So I have everything set up over here, and I gotta say, she's looking really, really good. Again, this whole build came in at about $1,084 at the time of filming. It's those 2 14 terabyte Western Digital Gold drives that really kind of blew up the budget a little bit to $1,700. But for $1,100 all in, this is a really good, well-rounded machine that can do a lot. So for instance, I have DaVinci Resolve open right now, and as you may notice, this is actually the footage from yesterday of me doing the build. I have this set up with the Logitech MX Creative Console. This is a really cool device that you can use because you can program this to any program. It comes with this really nice dial and customizable button, as well as these little buttons down here that are also customizable. I really like this a lot because I can program this so I can switch my workspaces around in DaVinci Resolve, and then I can add my serial nodes, and then I can just start my color correction. Now, when I was talking about the CPU and the GPU that go into this. That combination of the Intel 265K with the Intel B580, that's actually a really good combo for video editing. You get a lot of hardware support with that combo. So for hardware support, that basically means it's gonna handle that 10-bit 422 H.265 footage that a lot of cameras shoot nowadays. If you ever have any HEVC footage, especially from your phone, you really need some hardware acceleration to handle that. Otherwise, you have to work with proxies. So right off the bat, I just slapped a LUT on this guy and I can just get to work right away. I use an Intel CPU for all of my editing rigs. It just works a lot better for the FX3 footage that we work with here. And using a device like this is actually kind of cool because I can program this, I can zoom in on my timeline, I can just kind of scrub through, make my cuts, go along, use this to like make cuts at different points, and then I can just start overlaying my B-roll. But performance is there. I mean, playback, no issue. A lot of people talk about export times and render times. For render times, it's kind of a funny thing because frankly, I feel like it's sort of plateaued. You're gonna see maybe small differences in render times going from a 5090 to a B580, and I'm talking about like a couple of seconds, because frankly, encoders work really well in a lot of these programs. A lot of people are using the same presets. You're doing probably like an H.264, like MP4, 8-bit, that's gonna go onto YouTube at a pretty decent bit rate, like a constant bit rate. Really, you don't have to worry about that when it comes to render times. What I really look forward to when it comes to kind of messing around with hardware, you know, Puget has a lot of benchmarks that they use for DaVinci Resolve, Premiere, Photoshop, all of those things. And those synthetics are pretty good. They give you a numbered score, and you can even see where the B580 ranked on that list. But I found that synthetics kind of don't give a real world picture. When it comes to performance, really what I'm looking for is how does it handle when you start stacking up things a little bit crazy? So for instance, you know, I just put a LUT in my footage, but once I start sort of doing some crazy things on the color correction side, I start making a couple of more nodes where I start doing some power windows, and I start sort of masking off different areas. And then if I use something like a noise reduction, that's gonna be really intensive. So how does it perform there? And that's where you're really gonna look at a lot of things. So for instance, I can do my noise reduction. All right, so I have noise reduction on, temporal noise reduction. I have it set to one of the faster presets and just for a slight reduction there. Now, we shoot at the base ISO of our camera. I'm gonna get a little technical on the camera side, but we shoot at the base ISO on the FX3. So frankly, noise isn't much of an issue anyway, so I don't really use noise reduction, but when we shoot on location, when we do events and things like that, you need to use noise reduction. That ends up being really beefy and ends up kind of putting your PC to the test. I have noise reduction on now, and it's running playback perfectly fine. Threw a couple of masks on here, did a couple of things in the color page. And when you start adding these things up in your timeline, that's where you really need your GPU to sort of help with some of the heavy lifting, and the B580 works really well here. Now, another demo I'd like to do is Photoshop. There we go. So I have Photoshop open here. I really like this creative console for sort of just helping me with some creative stuff here. You know, like I said, you can program this to whatever you want. You can program this to like brushes and other things. This is a 60 megapixel image from an A7R5. And so again, similar to DaVinci Resolve, performance for a lot of creative apps, you know, you can run a lot of creative apps on anything with a discrete GPU, frankly. Really where performance comes into play is what's the resolution of whatever canvas you're working on, especially with Photoshop, and how many layers are you adding? This is just, you know, a couple of like text layers that we slapped on here. But if I really start going in depth where I can just start like sort of duplicating, masking, and making some modifications to certain areas. So for instance, if I want to sort of darken a few key areas that maybe are a little bit like too bright, if I want to do some, you know, start removing some dust, scratches, things of that nature. If you've ever done a lot of photo retouching, things that require a lot of layers, that's when you start to notice that these Photoshop files really start to get a little laggy. But again, performance is going to be really good on a system like this. So that's not really something I would worry about too much. If you're really looking to get into content creation on a budget, again, for $1,100, Photoshop video editing, even OBS, all of that is going to run perfectly fine. So I wanted to sort of give a very quick demo of what that experience would be like, but frankly, it's going to work really well. I can guarantee that this combination, A+. And again, the build gives you a lot of room for growth. So if you want to add more memory, if you want to add more SSDs for more storage, anything that you want to add to this guy, you definitely have a lot of room to grow. So another bit I wanted to talk about was gaming, because now you can get the best of both worlds with a build like this. I have Doom Dark Ages running here, and I paired off this build with this Dell Alienware AW2723DF. This is a 1440 27-inch, 240 hertz IPS panel. IPS is going to be pretty good for a lot of color accurate stuff, especially because it's a little bit more budget friendly than OLED. So this is going to do you just fine if you want to do some color accurate work for video editing, photo editing, things like that. But also this is going to work really well for gaming. And right now performance, I'm getting frames in about the 80s-ish. You know, one thing to keep in mind, Intel B580, it's a pretty decent GPU that can do pretty well at 1440. I have XeSS on, I have this set to the high preset, textures are at like 2048, if you're familiar with Doom Dark Ages and like some of the texture sets there. And I'm getting a pretty good frame rate. Like this is actually really fine for me. The one thing to keep in mind is that this has 12 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, and this really is a more entry-level GPU. At that price point, I think this ASRock Steel Legend version is what, $269? And again, $1,100 for this whole build. Frame rate, it's jumping 82, it's hitting the 90s, 1% lows at like 73 right now, so that's not too bad. There's a lot going on the screen. Now, Doom is specifically an interesting one because the Doom games are actually really well optimized. Oh, getting my butt kicked. Like all of the Doom games have been notoriously well optimized, so they'll run on just about anything. If you're looking at things like Borderlands 4 or some other like really high-end AAA titles there, I mean, you're definitely going to be looking at playing this at maybe a 1080 resolution and playing this, oh, there we go, and playing this with sort of lower graphical settings. But all in, again, this is a pretty good, well-rounded budget build. You can do a little bit of everything. You can handle basically whatever you throw at it. And 1440p, I think, is the highest that you should go with this build. And depending on the game, you know, you might be pushing it. Oh, he got me. Depending on the game, you might be pushing it, right? But for a lot of like competitive games, a lot of like competitive shooters, I mean, you know, MOBAs, things of that nature, that's gonna run you just fine. But all in all, this really is kind of the best of both worlds. You get that gaming, you get that creative video editing, you can handle a little bit of Blender. Definitely gonna need some more memory for that for sure. But at the very least, I mean, if you're on a budget, if you're a student, if you want something that can do a little bit of everything, something like this is exactly what you should go for. And you can get a build as nice as this at your local Micro Center. So make sure you stop on by, check out our wide selection of PC parts or even some of our pre-builds, and check out the Intel bundle. You can get the Intel Core Ultra bundle for a really good price, and that paired off with one of the Intel GPUs, I really like that combination to get you a really good, well-rounded budget build. And if you don't have a Micro Center near you, then be sure to comment #IWantAMicroCenter near me.